Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, I want to talk about Dr. Mike's stimulus versus fatigue. Before I get into that topic, if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. The best topic ideas I turn into videos just like this. All right, so I had a client call today and somebody was asking about stimulus versus fatigue. Now, when I want to talk a little bit about this because programming can seem kind of complex, but if you sit me and Dr. Mike down, we might say things two different ways, but generally we're saying the same thing. Experientially, we know from programming and training people and what we've seen personally and what we've seen over time, that we come to basically the same conclusions, but we often express it in different ways. So before I get down that rabbit hole, when I'm doing live videos or when I'm doing answering general questions on Instagram or whatever, or even client questions, and people come to me worrying about stimulus versus fatigue, or worrying about all these different variables, all these different theories, and all these different methods of talking about training, discussing training, piecing training together. From mind-muscle connection, etc. Before everybody, people need to worry about that stuff. They need to worry about the basics. So people will come to me with these questions, about all these things, all these training variables and things they've heard. And invariably, when I am responding to them, they might think I'm being a little bit short or dismissing these things. Nothing could be further from the truth. The client today was asking about stimulus versus fatigue. And I told them, don't worry about that. We need to focus you on the basics. We need to get you focused on the basics because none of this stuff is going to work. None of this stuff is going to work. Stimulus versus fatigue isn't going to matter unless you master the basics. And this can seem a little bit confusing to people, but I was watching an interview with Dr. Mike and Paul Carter, and I forget what YouTube channel it was, but they were discussing this. And basically, if somebody could be in the gym, the gist of what Carter and Dr. Mike were talking about, somebody could be in the gym doing 40 sets for their lats, but they're not maximizing the sets. They're not using good form. They haven't learned how to really engage their lats, so they're not getting a lot of stimulus, but they're getting a lot of fatigue. So this is a huge point. This is a huge point of importance. Focusing on the basics involves not just doing work, but learning how to make every set count, learning how to make every rep count. One of the things I preach on this channel is trying to maximize every set, maximize every rep. It is the cornerstone of what I teach and what I've taught over the years, making every rep count. The basic foundation of what you are doing in the gym, making every rep count, that equates to making every set count. That equates to getting the most you can out of your workout, maximizing stimulus, and by doing so, you're maximizing stimulus compared to fatigue, if that makes sense. The lifters that are not maximizing stimulus or not getting the most out of their workouts and their sets and their reps tend to go the other way. They try to look to add other things, and herein lies my call to return to basics when somebody comes to me with these questions. The folks that are not maximizing the stimulus are confused. So they're trying to add all these different things, and they're trying to worry about all these different things. So it's funny when somebody comes to me with a question about stimulus versus fatigue. That's probably a huge part of the problem. But I got to return them to the basics and say, hey, stop worrying about stimulus versus fatigue. Once we get you focused on the basics, then we can start to worry about everything else. But returning to the basics is actually going to help you increase your stimulus, get more out of your workouts, and increase the ratio of stimulus versus fatigue. So what I try to do when it comes to programming or grounding people in the basics, and I got a question today on Instagram, what exactly are the basics, Big Hairy Ugly Dude? The basics are a reasonable focus on compound movements. The basics are a reasonable amount of volume. So I made a video about this a while back, a reasonable amount of volume. What is a reasonable amount of volume? Well, if you are maximizing your sets, getting the most stimulus out of your sets, then, you know, a reasonable amount of volume isn't going to push you way into fatigue. You're not going to need an incredible amount of volume. Generally, 15 to 18 sets is kind of a sweet spot that I recommend for most people per workout. If you are doing your sets correctly and working your exercises correctly, that's about all you're going to need. So we have a reasonable focus on compound movements backed by less impactful work, maybe higher up dumbbell work or machine work or isolation work or body weight work, etc. There are many ways to piece it together. So we have a reasonable focus on compound movements. We have a reasonable amount of volume. We have some defined progression approach. If you do not have a progression approach or focus on or specific focus during a workout, you're basically just doing a to-do list in the gym. We have consistency with diet and nutrition. You have to have nutrition goals each day, calorie intake and protein intake. You just can't be crazy. And you need consistency and persistence when it comes to attacking the gym. Now, a big variable in here, and something I preach over and over again, is proper form. Because, and this is a big one when it comes to stimulus, so I want you to listen to this. It can sometimes drive me crazy, and I've ranted about this, and I've went off about this, and I go off on this nearly every live video, that we live in an incredible age of information. An incredible age of information that teaches us exercise form from a myriad of coaches, but they're basically saying the same thing, adding a little different slant on a tip here, a little different slant on a tip there. But cumulatively, we have such an incredible amount of information to help us learn proper exercise form. Still, with all this information, the average trainee at the gym still is rather clueless about good form. If you are clueless about good form, and Dr. Mike and Paul Carter talked about this in the video, if you're clueless about proper form, you're going to end up stressing the muscles less and putting additional stress on your tendons and joints, etc. So you are lowering the stimulus and increasing the cumulative fatigue, or you're decreasing the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Exercise form is important, not just doing an exercise, but doing it properly. For example, when we are doing back work, whether it's rows or lat pull downs or whatever the case is, a lot of people will pull. They'll pull. Now, you guys know I don't like generally the term mind-muscle connection. Dr. Mike talks about it, and people think we're at odds a little bit, but when you look at what Dr. Mike is saying, I think we're kind of saying the same thing. And lat pull downs or rows are a good example. And correct me if I'm wrong. But when instead of pulling on a row or a lat pull down, I teach people to drive their shoulders and elbows back. Just that motion. Just put your arm in front of you now and just think about pulling, okay? Now, think about driving your elbow and shoulder back at the same time. Now do that again, just pull, and then drive your elbow and shoulder back at the same time. Which can you feel engaging your lats, your back muscles more? So even though I'm not a proponent of the mind-muscle connection, generally in some odd ways that it's applied, like trying to turn compound movements into isolation movements, or the elevation of it as a be-all, end-all above things like a reasonable amount of volume or progressive overload. If you do form properly, it is going to maximize the stimulus and maximize the targeted muscle group. If you get some Joe in the gym that's pulling on their rows or pulling on their lat pull downs, instead of focusing on driving their elbows and shoulders back and engaging the muscles they're trying to target, then they're going to get less stimulus and they're not going to get very good results. When I'm doing leg extensions, hey, I'm not a big fan of the mind-muscle connection, but I focus I actually put my hand on my inner quad, then my outer quad, just to kind of connect with what I am trying to target. Bicep curls, barbell rows. There are a lot of these herky-jerky barbell rows, and I freaking hate them. I freaking hate them. And I saw Dr. Mike and Paul Carter talk about this as well, because you're not maximizing stimulus. Therefore, when I am programming, I will focus people on things that do maximize stimulus or exercise variations of the row that have a greater chance of exercise or increasing stimulus for the average individual than doing these herky-jerky rows or cheat curls or whatever. So, what do I think about stimulus versus fatigue? Well, you know I focus people on the basics, but I hope you can see here that by focusing people on the basics, what I'm doing is trying to do basically the same thing as Dr. Mike. Increase the stimulus, decrease the fatigue, increase the stimulus to fatigue ratio to help you build muscle. So, people ask me, hey, big, hairy, ugly dude, are you and Dr. Mike teaching the same thing? What do you think of what Dr. Mike is teaching? It's basically what I teach, just in a different way of saying things, just in a different path. But ultimately, when you are training by focusing on the basics, and that includes proper form, and that involves getting all the fuckery out of your program, we are on the same path. We are on the same sheet of music. We just kind of teach it a little bit differently. Focus on the basics. Focus on the basics. Master the basics. So, guys, hope this video has been of some help. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. If you made it this far in this video and have yet to subscribe to my channel, please do. I'd appreciate the support. So, guys, as always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.